Alright, well the other day, a fellow Virago owner that watches some of the videos hit me up with an issue that he was having because he's doing a conversion from the first gen starter system, which is this little simple setup I got right here. I'll show it to you in a minute. Converting over to the second gen that uses this little puller coil that pulls the lever. So if you got a second gen, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe first gen owners have seen that thing sticking on the side of the motor. But this little guy replaces the little coil that's on the right side of the first gen bikes. So it sits down there, you know, right down here by your leg. So let me show you this real quick because it's interesting. I'll show you his problem. Hope you don't mind. I'll put his little clip of what it's doing on there, but it was acting really weird. Let me show you what the first gen setup does. So normally you got the little coil. This is your little starter solenoid that pulls in and it makes the starter motor turn when you got it hooked up to the battery. So it takes a positive, goes down to the big one, and it runs along underneath the bike, goes over to your starter motor. Now this is a second gen motor. First gens don't have the little clutch on them, but the motor is the same. And then this is a big old ground to simulate everybody's bolted to the frame. So this thing energizes by this lead that goes up to your wiring harness. Now one wire is positive and it is a keyed positive, so when you turn the key on you get power. Well, your button on your first gen is a negative button, so this would be the negative wire. So if I pretend that I'm the button and I touch it to the negative like I touched the button, zoom, the starter motor turns. So simple as can be. All these guys are doing right here is pulling a coil in that pulls a contact in that makes the positive go down to the starter motor. It's connected to the frame and it starts the motor. Well, in looking at his problem and also looking at the second gen system, because you might want to do like him, he's converting from a first gen system over to a second gen on a 920. You see that there's tons of difference. So let me go over here and pick one of these guys up because it's really interesting how Yamaha made some changes. Alright, so for the first gen, like I showed before, all it's got is this simple little coil, the little solenoid that pulls in, and the positive is always there for the key. You just touch the negative and away things go. Well, I'm going to tell you, I guess Yamaha, after this fiasco of an issue with this first gen system, you know, grinding and doing all this stuff, you know, they redesigned the gears and they put the little lever on there and all that. They must have fired that entire bunch of engineers and rehired them because this little coil right here, although it's just a coil that pulls down the same way, it is designed totally different than the simple little coil down there. Alright, so just what did they do here? Well, you can see on top you got the two big poles, and that's where the big wires go. One comes from the battery, one goes over to the starter. Well, that's the same. So you might think, looking at these two wires, one's going to be positive because it's tied to this positive. This is actually the starter motor side. This is the battery side. So this little guy goes to the starter motor. This guy comes from the battery. He's blank by himself. But the way they designed this thing, which seems crazy, but it actually is very logical, they put both these as positives. And so the coil wires are both positive on this one. They're using the frame of it as the negative. And if you look inside, you'll see there is the contacts that pull up and contact these big poles on top. So when you energize the coil, it pulls the lever, which pulls the gear set over to make it stay engaged, but it also pushes the contacts up, and the contacts touch up inside of there, and they make the hot power go over to the starter. So let's put it back together here real quick. So there's where it goes back. So this is over to the starter side, starter motor. This comes from the battery. These are both hot though. So if you tried to wire this thing in, just like this one, if you put the hot wire over here and the hot wire over here, and then you thought this was hot, so you wanted to ground this one, it ain't gonna work because that's not the way this thing is set up. So I'll show you here in just a second how to wire one of these guys in to a first gen using that to actually flip the voltage. So what I got to do is put positive onto this one instead of negative onto it like I did over there. So let's get set up over here and we'll see how to wire one of these things in. And then I'll also show you the problem that he was having. So if we want to wire this guy in, we got to do a little bit of finagling, but we don't really have to do anything to the wire itself. We just got to use that little solenoid right over there to flip the voltage over. So let me get set up here and we'll show you how to do this. So if I want to take this guy loose, what I need to do is take the big wire that's running underneath the left side of the bike. I would want to take that loose from the start. So this is the first gen setup. So we're going to take that guy loose. And you can eliminate it because we don't really need that big of a wire anymore, because all we're going to do is be using this right here to pull the coil down. So take that guy loose, and let's take him loose over here off of our solenoid. Alright, so we got the big wire off here. We would replace this out. Now this is all still first gen going up to the harness, so it's still going to be a positive wire, keyed wire, and it's going to be a negative wire from your button on your first gen. So you're not going to be able to change this stuff. But what you change is when you put this little guy in line, and this is one fully wired up. So you can see it's got the big wire that still has a battery. So the big one comes over to the battery terminal. This little guy right here, this is the plus 12 volt. It's not a negative on this system. And then the little shorty, that's the one that goes over to the starter motor. So what we got to do is wire this guy in to the starter. So I'm going to turn around here so you can see him actually operate. So if we were hooking all this up, we would change out for this type starter of the second gen with the clutch. We'd do all of that, get that all inside, use a new side, and then we would hook up our little guy right here with the shorty to the starter like he's supposed to be. Get him hooked in. Alright. Now you'll notice there's a little wire hanging over here because this is the problem that you'll see. If I can get it turned around right on the video, you'll see what was going on with his issue. So we still got our ground. We still got this starter grounded to the frame of it. Now we got the battery wire. Okay, so the big battery wire is still the same. It's going to go up to the contacts up on top up here to the contact right here, the blank one. So be careful, you can't wire these backwards or it isn't going to work. The battery wire goes to the one that doesn't have the pole. The starter goes to the one that does have the little pole. So all we're going to do is hook this one into hot. So let me get this one over to the hot. Right there. So we still got our first gen solenoid wired in because we're going to have to use him because he goes to the harness. So now we got the hot wire going to this guy on the pole that doesn't have the contact, so it's over on this side. We got that set up. So now I still have my hot coming in off my first gen harness. Here's my starter button off the first gen harness just like before. So what this is going to do is when I contact this, it's going to switch the power down to here and it's going to go down here. But in order to get it to do it, I got to hook this one instead of the one that went to the starter. I got to hook this guy, the little wire that runs down here and goes to him. I got to hook that little wire into my old coil. Let me get him hooked up like that right there. So like I say, this coming over here to this guy right here, this is the little small wire that runs all the way over to him. That is a positive wire on this coil. It's a negative over here on this one. But this guy's going to flip my voltage for me. So when I touch the negative, it's going to energize the positive and it's going to pull this thing in. So let me just hook up the negative and you can see how it works. So I'm going to hook this one to simulate the ground on the frame. And when I hit the negative, which would be the start button, everything lines up and that guy stays in and it'll start the motor. Now his issue, like I showed in the little video, his little clip, is because this guy wasn't grounded. So if I take that ground loose, all I got is hot over here. And it'll actually click and engage, but it won't stay engaged. So if you see right here, you see what it's doing? Because there's no negative to pull the power, because this is powered with 12 volts on both legs. It's not like a regular positive and negative coil. It's a double powered coil. Because there's no negative, it'll just sit there and pulse. But all I gotta do is hook the negative up to simulate that it's connected to the motor properly and it's grounded properly to the motor, and there you go. So that was his issue, is that this thing must not have had a good ground, or it was hooked up backwards, because then it would force the ground on one of these legs and it would make it drop out like that. So there you go. If you ever are wanting to convert one of these over, you got an idea to put a 1100 or a 1000 starter system on your first gen, there's how you would do simple wiring that doesn't require any jumping or anything for all this. All you do is use your old solenoid and just wire the little wire over to this guy. Make sure he's grounded good on your motor, which he should be normally. This guy's grounded. You just hook that back in just like it was on the second gen, and away you go. So alrighty, hope that helps someone, and thanks for watching.